fantasy, art history with Abelard and Joe. Hey, Joe.
Whoa, hey, Abelard. It's so great to talk to you. Who's that up there?
It's been a little while. Well, this is my friend Patrick, who's from. Well, Patrick, would you like to introduce yourself? Name and favorite hobby?
Um, my name is Patrick. I'm a sock belonging to a dissolute writer who lives in Northern England. And my hobby currently is looking for my spider because he was living inside me for a while, but he scampered away when someone tried to change me. And now he runs pretty fast, but he's got to be around here somewhere, and I kind of miss having him living in me. So if you see a spider running around, that might be mine. Let me know. Tell him it's okay to come home.
Dude,
Wow.
we'll keep an eye out. It's hard to lose a roommate.
Yeah.
It feels so lonely and empty, you know?
Well, it's for socks, so our lives were meant to be. I don't want to be a sock essentialist, but we are meant to be filled with something.
Yeah, and we're meant to be paired.
That's my personal belief.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Wow, how beautiful.
Yep.
So, well, what are we talking about today, Abelard?
Well, I actually let Patrick choose. But we are talking about John Blanche. Patrick knows a lot more about than I do, but we've got some real treats to show you today.
Would you like
Yes.
to give us a quick John Blanche introduction?
Yes, but first I have to let you know that while I know a little bit about John Blanch, I know much less than whoever is going to correct me in the comments because he has a big fan base with a lot of people with certain traits, and I'm sure I'm going to say some stuff wrong, which I apologize for in advance.
Oh, don't worry. No one watches this show.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So John Blanch is a fantasy and artist and illustrator who was born in 1948. Started to get famous around the 1970s. Came up around with people like Ian Miller. He did a lot of independent work, and then he became strongly associated with the company Games Workshop, in particular their various Warhammer franchises, Warhammer Fantasy and the science fiction one, Warhammer 40,000. And he became the art director of that company and remained so, I think, for around 37 years, from around 1986 to 2023. And so his influence is, as a painter and illustrator, substantial, but also he's basically had a strong effect on every other artist they've employed on setting their direction, and his works and his ideas of a world have been blasted by capitalism in the form of boxes and videos and book covers just all over the world to infect a bunch of other nerds. And so he has become the reluctant doyen of a movement based around his work. And many is the nerd who will speak bitterly of John Blanch and say they have managed to shake his hand at one point or another.
Oh boy.
So he's a good artist in his own right, but he's also occupies a rare and unusual position of being a kind of almost like a Renaissance artist with a bunch of a patron, a church, a movement, a cult, and like his own little world, his own little reality that he's been a demigod of.
Yeah.
Amazing. Let's look at some art. Give me a second here. Wow.
Yeah.
Look at that. Here we go.
Very nice.
And is this related to Warhammer, or is this its own thing?
This is its own thing. This is one of John Blanch's first big books that I'm aware of. He did some work for a book called The Tolkien Bestiary by David Day. He only had a few images in that, but that helped his career. And then in 1979, this book by an author called Henry Wolfe, called The Prince and the Woodcutter, came out. It's an illustrated fairy story. Henry Wolfe's, well, I will not make any comment on his writing. It's okay, but the images are, as you can see, startling and impressive, and they are all by a very young John Blanch. And this is from one of the final scenes in the story where the town, which has formed a part of the setting, burns down chaotically. A northern medieval-style town just enfolded in John Blanch's very beautiful texture. So one of the most beautiful ways to have your house burnt down ever.
The thing that I noticed, first of all, looking at this specific piece is, other than the wonderful border that encloses it, is that there's no sky here.
Yeah.
There is only flames.
You will not get any relief from the action of the flames.
Yeah.
And most of the good images you can get of this are online, and online you don't get the illuminated borders that you can see with this one. This is only in the book, I think. But part of the reason I wanted to show you this is partly because it's very early John Blanch, and it kind of shows you a little picture of his soul to begin with. It has some prefigures of his later Warhammer work, but artistically, this is a man who loves filling his image. There are rarely genuinely empty spaces, and if I remember correctly, I do remember him saying in an interview, one quality of a masterwork would be that whenever you zoomed in on it, even if you looked at even the smallest little fragment of the page, there would be something interesting happening. Maybe something figurative, but maybe just a wash of color, of texture, of something. And you can see that here, where if you just zoom in, no matter how small you zoom in, even if you're not looking at anything you understand, it's incredible things are happening in the image, and you would probably be fascinated even if you just saw a fragment of it. So mission accomplished, I think.
Yeah. What's that? Horror evacuee?
Yeah.
Is that how you say that? I heard of that once. He's got some of that. You have to fill up everything or it's scary.
There's also a sense of like unbelievable profusion in a lot of this work that I think ends up serving him so well to illustrate Warhammer stuff, where it's all about large multiples of stuff.
Yes.
And like at this level of zoom, like at first, at the outermost level, it was a hideous profusion of flames and houses. And now there's a hideous profusion of like roof tiles, individual flames, what look like they might be people in the streets, although they're just sort of rendered as this kind of rubble. And then if you get in even further, there's just a hideous profusion of marks. Like there's just so many pen marks on the page drawing you around. Like no matter what level of resolution you're at, there's an immense amount of stuff to sort of swirl you around.
Yeah, I think this is fascinating, especially like remember this, viewers, when we get to the very last image we're going to look at, because if you take a close look at the way the mark making is handled here, you'll see that years later in his life, this is still what he's doing. He's still making these little dots and lines just like this, and they have a sort of furry quality to them. And it's, there's some stippling, there's some, it's not like it's not a perfect, like, beautiful line work where every line is the same distance from every other line. He is using them in a sort of messy way to build up texture in these flames. And it's really cool to see that he's onto this already during basically his first work, and he never really stops doing this, although he is certainly capable of working in other mediums.
It's also very red, and as we're going to find out, John Blanch, other colors may be invited, but red will always be his number one waifu, and blue rarely, if ever, and often at corporate command. But that is a color that he does not like. He has called it a fugitive color, and he put more emotional emphasis into the word fugitive than I think a paling ink would deserve. He seems to really have something against it.
Yeah, this is great. This little detail here. It's just like completely dynamic. You can imagine the artist zoomed in on this little square of painting here and giving it just as much love as everything else that was in that image originally.
Do we want to look at something that expresses that intense color philosophy?
Oh, yes. Why don't we move on to... Oh, wait. Oh, no. I messed it up.
Readers, close your eyes.
Close your eyes, everybody.
Viewers.
Wait.
Wait.
Okay, there it is. Okay, open your eyes
again.
Phew. I gotta say that setting up this call required an immense amount of patience and some hard-won knowledge about how to do stuff. And me and Abelard and Patrick also, we've been working really hard.
Yes.
So,
we have. Well, you have. I turned up at the last minute, but
you worked really hard too. You did.
Yeah, we all worked hard.
We were all very patient and hardworking, and we deserve accolades and crowns.
Are we working as hard as this guy in the middle who's lifting his machine gun and his gauntlet?
Well, doesn't the armor do all the work for him?
Patrick, does the armor do all the work for them, or is it different than that?
It does a proportionate amount of the work. So, depressingly, I know the answer to this, which is that when the armor goes off, it's hard for them to move around, but they can just about move around in the armor, and it's a strength amplifier, depending on how the lore has currently played out. So he's definitely feeling something. He's feeling at least the weight of his gun, definitely, and probably the fist as well. and he can't carry infinite amounts. So the armor mainly provides enough power to carry itself weightlessly. And he's also got a nuclear backpack on, which you can't see. So the guy, I mean, avoid swamps if you're an Astartes, or basically anything without very strong. He's wisely standing on a stone statue is probably the only thing that could realistically carry his weight. But if they were real, they would weigh about as much as a car, and they would be putting all that weight onto two meaty legs. So
he's also textured like a car. So
yeah, he's bright and he's shiny, which, as we'll see, is unusual for a John Blanch image. This is from 1993. It's the Warhammer 40k second edition box art, and this is, I think, it's nearly 7 years into John Blanch being the art director for Games Workshop. And this is called the Games Workshop's Red Period because I don't know exactly why. It was some combination of how they photographed the images, how they replicated it over different products, and red selling. So there were lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of red pictures, red backgrounds, red miniatures. John Blanch likes red. I don't know if he likes shiny red, but he seems to be having an okay time here. And there is blue in this. There's a blue helmet down the bottom, and there's blue at the top in this alien cityscape. So he's outside of his I guess, comfort zone in some ways, although very much within it in other ways.
One thing that's always been of interest to me looking at these, and this one specifically, I think, shows this, these images that are specifically of Warhammer guys in the Warhammer world, is that they're proportionally, they look kind of goofy to someone, me, namely, who hasn't been looking at them since childhood. Head so small, feet so big, like kind of like more like a puppy than a tough guy, which I believe has something to do with the constraints of illustrating a miniature. And so
basically, I think so.
So has to be more, you got to make the feet real big so it doesn't fall over, I guess.
Yeah. Well, Space Marines are everything in Warhammer has. Firstly, the weapons are these are the guys are meant to be 28 millimeters high. Like they're like 1 or 2 centimeters high. So very deliberately, one of Brian Ansell's first big ideas was we're going to oversize the weapons proportionately. And this is something that scale modelers have always hated about 40k or any Warhammer. The weapons are too big, and if you make the whole model proportionately larger, the weapons don't make any sense. But they do work at this miniature scale, and with Space Marines, they are small, and almost the entirety of their design is designed to create the sense of power, immensity, weight, size at a very small scale. And so they have these crazy, disproportionate legs.
You're frozen, Patrick.
There's a kind of. You still hear me?
Oh, you're back now. It's okay. Fine. I'll put up the oops sign.
Yeah, we'll solve it on.
There's a trifecta of necessity between like it has to be a toy, so it has to work as a toy in a playing piece that you use in a game, but it also has to be a model of a human being, and it also needs to represent this imagined world. And so you're usually synergizing those 3 things and creating something that sort of works. And at least here, but this is very naive era Warhammer. No one in the world who made this would ever be ashamed of the proportions of a Space Marine. They're just all in, and we'll make it bigger. Don't worry, it'll work. Currently, in the last 10 or 15 years, ever since a notable court case, Games Workshop has moved over more to guarding its IP as a whole, and it produces stuff like animation and is aiming for TV series. And from that point, they've committed a crime, especially in the Warhammer world. They have changed the proportions of Space Marines to make them more sane looking. And so they can work in both visual stories and as models. And this caused a mild schism in the Warhammer community because, of course, you had changed the proportions of the Supermen, which is wrong. But even in the most recent, very big game called Space Marine 2, which has the new Primaris Space Marines with the correct proportions, there was another minor scandal because when the Space Marines sit down, the model makers and designers hadn't worked out that they should how properly they should sit down. So the people who made the game had to insert a weird armored flange around their knees that made sense so that the giant men could sit down and talk to each other. And this caused a bit of a ruckus as well. It's like, where's that coming from? But yes, they are symbolic, and they are from a world of a smaller scale where they're chess pieces, really, hyper chess pieces. So as a chess piece, all this wacky shit makes complete sense. When you make them bigger and bigger and bigger, it kind of works if you're being very operatic, and then the closer you get to realism, the harder it fails. But don't worry, because we will see very little realism in any Warhammer picture ever. So just enough to hit the emotions, really.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that not going for realism in completely right call here. If you're making something like this, uh, you just gotta go with what you have very hard, which is what is happening in this specific image that we're looking at here. Got your main guy, he's right in the bang in the middle. He's the most important one. Compositionally, you're just gonna put him right in the center there. But he's also balanced by an even larger orc down in the corner who's looking out at you. You can see how this is like, this was, you said it was box art?
Yes, it's
Like,
the cover of the box of the main Warhammer box. So it's the main thing they're selling, and it goes in the shop. And this image is facing you from the shelf with a big Warhammer 40,000 across the top.
Yeah, you can kind of see how this image can be divided into stuff it would be okay to cover up with text and stuff that you would leave to jump out at you. But even the places where there's stuff that you could, you could probably cover it up with the words Warhammer, it's still been treated very carefully and very beautifully. So here we have some details, and it looks like all of these other space marines, I guess, they've all painted special symbols on their helmets individually.
Yes, which are a nightmare to do by hand, I can tell you. And you usually end up using transfers. Well, they are for me at least. But yeah, there's also a bit of Renaissance / medieval art in there, which John Blanch, as we know, also likes, and he's been known to just put bits of historical art that he thinks are cool into, for real, into the Warhammer world, just saying, yeah, it's the Mona Lisa, it exists. It's, this guy in a war parade is carrying the Mona Lisa, don't worry about it, when we're moving on. And various other, like, I think there's a very famous picture of a Knight Panther, which is just a direct rip-off of a Napoleonic chasseur portrait, which is quite famous and is in the Louvre. I suspect he's done a lot of that. He has like a lot of influences, and they will show up directly. He's not really sending any other message than what the painting explicitly says. And well, if he's adding intelligence and depth to it, it's just literally in the amount, in the stuff, in the literal things that he's adding into it.
Yeah, this is interesting. I feel like I've seen countless media where there's like super strong fighters from the future, but none of them carry banners around. None of them have this that seems so old fashioned. It's the future.
Yes.
Why do they have banners? What are the banners for? Well, it's because they look cool and they're good and it's a good idea. And this for what it's worth, the world of Warhammer is at least it's not boring.
It's never boring. That's true. Apart from if you deal with the administratum, but even then, when they put that in computer games and stuff, it's still kind of weirdly fun because you'll be trapped in a queue. But it's not just a queue; it's a queue 5 miles long, and there are people there who've lived their entire lives in the queue, and there's queue politics. And so, like, it's never even when it's boring, it's like mega super exceptional, incredibly boring to an operatic scale. But basically, as has been remarked by many people, they have the banners, they're space knights. A lot of the theme of Warhammer and Warhammer 40,000 is it's medieval, or it's John Blanch's view of what medieval is. It's medieval in space. It has a lot of the... we can get into this if you want to, but there's a particular view of medieval Europe. There are lots of different views of medieval Europe because it had a bunch of different stuff happened. And depending on who you are, what you've inhaled from your intellectual tradition, or where you are like politically, it can be very different. You can have like... let's say a trad Cath version of medieval Europe where everything was completely fine. We, the Catholics, have saved Europe, and now everything's going to be great. Things are gradually improving. Oh no, someone's ruined the church. Or you can have like a intellectual post-Enlightenment medieval Europe, where well, post-Protestant scientists were men of the future, and it turns out the medieval period was just rubbish. It was superstitious, demon-haunted, hieratic, madness. Or you can have like, I don't know, a bunch of others. It would depend on who you are, but the vision of medievalness that comes through on John Blanch, even though he loves the medieval period, is very much, though he doesn't realize it, I think, comes from a kind of distant Protestant Anglo version of like, this is spooky, weird Catholic bullshit. It's full of like big hats and powerful but illegitimate hierarchies. Everything's very slow. Everything's mouldering. No one really understands anything, and it's very much what a 18th century British
Uh-oh, we lost Patrick again.
Would say, if you ask me in art and pop media, know where they get this idea from or that they're using it. But maybe it doesn't matter because now it's in space and it's become its own thing.
In your opinion, and maybe you don't know this, but do you think that how much influence did John Blanch, as the creator of these images and the art director, have on the lore itself of the world of Warhammer?
A lot, I think,
Yeah.
because I can point out particular things that only exist because John Blanch invented them. So there's a thing called a servo skull, which is if you're a servant of the Imperium and you die and you're a good servant, they flenge your skull, fill it with weird semi-psychic materials and an anti-gravity machine and a computer, and then they say, look, you have been reborn as a servant of the Imperium because you did that well. And those only exist because John Blanch invented them. One of his weird little marginalia where he's just like, I'm going to put in a flying skull. Other stuff, like I think the Watches in the Dark, are lots of details, but for many, to put it this way, all while he was gradually fading as the art director at Games Workshop, he was still relentlessly producing what's called, I think, what do you call it? The kind of art that comes before the main art, the kind of the inspirational concept art, yeah. And Games Workshop still has shelves upon piles on piles of unseen, unused John Blanch concept art. In many cases, the first image of something that comes through comes from either the miniature designers or it comes from John Blanch, and they kind of get together and work out, and his vision of what things are, while it's never completely replicated entirely, is often one of the original ones for how things look and feel. So I would say he's almost like an Archangel Michael he's like a demiurge of the Warhammer universe. He's one of the first creative forces that shows you what it might look like if it was real, and that flows outward from him powerfully. I think, yeah, I think he had a lot to do with how things look and feel.
Cool. That's the dream. Here we're looking at some more of the tiny little details.
Mm-hmm. There's more Renaissance. This is meant to be I think the big sky pylons in the back are Eldari, who are space elves, but for some reason they have Middle Ages and human Renaissance style architecture as their ruins, which could easily be completely normal in the Warhammer world. That kind of thing happens all the time. But this is the second arm of John Blanch's principle of every part of the painting should be interesting. In this case, he's doing it in the simplest way of just putting weird, cool shit everywhere in the painting. So there's a goblin, you zoom in on the goblin, he's got an earring, you zoom in on the earring, there's a little goblin face on the earring, there's like a shine, there's a shine on the gem. Here, like, there's a mouth of it. It's not just, we zoom in on like the statue the main guy is standing on. It's not just a statue, there's a skull there, obviously, there's a beautiful little flower growing from the mouth of this ancient statue. There's stuff everywhere.
This is like the dream of the miniature, right? It's like you, a full-size person, can hold in your hand this world that just gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And, and all of the, you got a guy, and the guy's got he's got a little skull that flies around, and you can paint the eyes in the skull, and you can paint the teeth, and it goes on forever.
There are also paintings that gesture toward the kind of attention they'd like you to pay to them, which is the way I think about looking at this kind of art when I was a kid, of just poring over the same few, even things that are things like promotional art, like the box of a bunch of Space Marines or whatever, that you get absolutely lost in and pour your energy and imagination into wondering what's outside the borders and digging deeper and deeper into square inches of it.
Dude, yeah, it's like teaching you how to be a huge nerd.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Invest more of your attention in this little Abelard. It's going to be rewarded with a picture of a flower.
Don't picking up new guys, and we're going to put them in a list, and that'll be a book, and you can buy it. And then you can also buy the guy.
It'll be enumerated in a world you can control.
Ooh.
Yep. Peak paracosm art, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
Well, let's go look at something else that probably really would speak to everyone as a child.
Yay! Dominating power-armored nuns.
Ooh. Yes, it's true. In the world of Warhammer, there are a couple of women.
Yeah. There are some women. This is a very famous, beloved John Blanch piece. I think it's called either Sister of Battle or Canoness Viridian, I think. This lady has been produced as a model who I bought and painted badly, but she was the front cover for the 1997 Sisters of Battle Codex, and that's only like, say, a few years after the Blood Angels one, but we've crossed over from the Red period, which weirdly didn't have that much red in it, to this period, which is more of like Middle Hammer, where things have become, instead of like grimdark and incredibly fun, grimdark and incredibly grimdark, and then more grimdark, but still quietly, secretly fun behind, but you don't say it out loud. And so things just got serious, as they say, in the end of a popular running cartoon series where the main villain has returned and a character might die. This isn't just your uncle, your weird insular uncle's Warhammer. This is like newer and darker, and I think probably the peak and the almost the aleph of the Blanchian Warhammer style, which is part of why I chose that. And also, there's a woman in it, and John Blanch has a really particular style of woman that he's in love with, and that replicates and flows out and is repeated in different versions in all over many of his paintings. And it is this spike-heeled, powerful, dominatrix type lady who reminds me a lot of Alexander McQueen's view of women. He said Alexander McQueen said he was doing his mother when he was doing a woman. They were all kind of like tigers, prowling. They're kind of, it's sort of sexual, but it's deeply sublimated into a lot of weird stuff, including violence. And the rumor, and I don't know if this is true, is that this original part, the original for this painting, it was an actual S&M piece, and that this pile of skulls down at the bottom and bones was that, as it started out as like an actual guy who's kneeling down with an S&M dominatrix standing on him, and then John Blanche just basically transformed it. But also, if you see like the hair, this fright wig, albino bob, this shows up a lot in John Blanche art in a bunch of different women. He even had an entire line of models called Femme Militant, who are all kind of girls, sort of a bit like this. Yeah, he's got a type, basically. He was a punk, he was a biker, and here's what he loves. And even though it's not technically the red period, you can see him falling into his blanchness with just like this field of unspeakable umbers and oranges, yellows, reds. The blue has finally been banished, wherein it will never return, and we are living in like a hellish war dimension now forever.
Here's what I think is great about this sort of treatment of the female in fantasy art, particularly, because I love this unapologetically, because her look is great, and she does look tough and powerful, and so I think that compared to when people talk about doing like a tough lady warrior in fantasy art, the other way that you generally see this, at least in the past, is if you remember Abelard. Do you remember when we looked at that Frazetta drawing of Eowyn?
Yeah, I couldn't possibly forget.
Yeah. Well, I'll put it up here so people can remember, because it's an interesting contrast, because this is it's like, okay, this is a sexy woman, and it's cool, but also she has a sword, and she's wearing some armor, and there is a way that you usually see that treated in maybe like older style fantasy art, where it's like, yeah, she's got a sword, but her armor's not really very good, is it? It looks like maybe you could beat her up, probably. And look, she's not wearing very much clothes, so that's cool, right?
Like the focus is still on her body as like a pleasurable object.
Yeah. And comparatively here, I am frightened of this woman. She does look sexy, but not in a way that she cares that I think that.
Yeah. The irresistible urge to Venmo this woman about $800.
Yeah, man. She's amazing. She deserves it. Look at her haircut. God damn. Yeah. Incredible costume design on this lady. I think taking whatever your whatever gets you going as an artist, and in this case, if that is pictures from an S&M magazine, this is great, because this is like working so well with the other things that he is trying to do here. Mm-hmm. If somebody had done their if the sexy battle nuns just looked like scantily clad ladies, that would be pretty bad, actually. But she looks like she's very dangerous and doesn't care about me, and I find that fascinating. Why does she have little pieces of paper pinned to her
they are purity seals. They have a long history, but basically they are something else John Blanch invented, which is a lot of Imperial warriors. Basically, you get a little reward for being super pure, or you take an oath or something, or you achieve something, or you pray a lot, or you defy chaos, and you get one of these little seals, and gets jammed onto you, and you carry it around as your purity seal. And depending on the lore, they may or may not work. But there are some pretty cool scenes of Space Marines and whoever fighting demons, and the demon turns up, and suddenly the purity seal start to incandesce and set on fire because they're just too pure to tolerate it, which also looks very metal. Two other things I'd like to mention about this painting are the contraposta stance with the heels, which I call it the Blanche stance. It shows up a lot in a lot of his painting. It's all over his work, especially in many of the female figures. And if you look towards the background, weird, ugly, fat guys who are kind of a bit mutated. That's something we didn't really have time to get into, but they are the other main characters in the Blanche verse, which is weird, grotesque, fat white guys, or like biomechanoid dudes who are also kind of middle ages but also cybernetic. And you can see behind the canoness there's a pile of these guys who are up to some fanatical business, but they also show up in a bunch of other Blanche work.
Yeah, just a cascade of dudes kind of crushing down towards the bottom left of this painting. And the only thing that's keeping the entire painting from sliding off of the picture plane is that one perfect high-heeled boot on that skull that's kind of pointing us up in the opposite direction. She is the one point of stability on which this entire avalanche waits. But she can do it, because look at her. She's not going anywhere. So, shall we look at one more piece of artwork?
Okie doke.
I will go get it. All right. Wow. So, what's this?
This is from a book, a very recent book. This is a book called Voodoo Forest, which John Blanch, he left Games Workshop, I think, in 2023. After, I think he was slowly doing less and less work for them. And then he officially left in 2023. This is from a book he produced called Voodoo Forest, which is basically his sketches. In this case, they were all pencil sketches. Then produced a sequel to the book called Scions of Voodoo, which are color portraits. Much of this book is just pictures of forests and strange ships flying in the air, tumbled rock falls, mushrooms, bizarre. It was almost a nature book. He said he was very absorbed in the clouds that he saw from his drawing room, and a lot of it has these incredibly magnificent textures. But this is almost, I wouldn't say from the end of his career, because he's still going, but from the post Games Workshop period of his career where he's no longer their art director. And while we can see that this is in some ways quite a Warhammer-y picture, it's also different. It seems to be almost a loop back to some of his original work from before he started working with GW. And we see a lady, we don't know if she's in Blanche stance, but she certainly looks like she might be. She's not a nun, but she's got something going on, and she has this, again, ethereal, dark, powerful beauty, but also this deeply sublimated sexuality, a sense of threat, and plenty of stuff. She's covered with all kinds of things, all of which infer a particular strange world that she comes from. So, I guess this is from the relaxed Blanchian period. Maybe there will be a new period. We don't know. He's still going. He's only in his 70s. He could produce some really weird shit still. But this might be one of the endpoints.
I feel like we've looked at a bunch of artists, and when you look at the work that they do that's not, strictly speaking, like commercial work, that's more like what they're doing on their own, sometimes it's totally different from the commercial work. And sometimes you look at it and you think, this guy, he really just got to do the thing that he mostly wanted to do his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I think so.
That's the absolute dream. Because this is different a little, but it also has, you can tell he's just been enjoying himself.
Mm-hmm. And an interesting thing about the whole Voodoo Forest project is something we didn't bring up, which comes out less in his Warhammer work, which is the sense of the combining of texture, which we already talked about, with silence, stillness, and decay, and these very rotting, piled up, kind of tumble down, like ruined realities. We don't know if this lady is from one, but from the way she is dressed, and also from other images in this book, everything is really grimy and ancient, and like it feels like you could grate cheese with the page, basically, because there's so much texture on it. Yep, and if you zoom in, we can see his little pencil marks. Everything feels, nothing is smooth. There's a little patch of skin down there, maybe, which might be, but everything else about her is like you could run your fingers over her, over any part of that strange clothing and body and feel a strange and particular texture. I feel like there's a lot of like touch sense in a lot of Blanche's work, especially in his later period, in this period. So that's another weird thing that stands out, and the way it combines to create a sense of silence and stillness and waiting in a lot of his pictures, which obviously is there less in the Super Warhammer stuff because people are very much doing things. It's a game, so no one's hanging around. Everyone's running about. But before and after, there's lots of like quiet moments.
I think that this kind of mark making, this kind of drawing, and this kind of pencil work in particular is very, you can view it, you can look at the picture very empathetically. The lines and the marks communicate to you the way that the artist's hand was moving to make them. Like you can imagine the physical movement that captured them. It's like it's very transparent and very connective and kind of communal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's true. What I wonder about is that, especially for, let me go back to the big image. When you have something like this detailed part of like her cape with all of these little words and creatures and things in there, what I wonder is how much of this is planned. And what I suspect is that none of it is really, strictly speaking, planned out. And one of the pleasures of looking at a piece like this is that you can see the artist sort of discovering what is going to appear there, kind of as it, like, you make one mark and then, or you look at the clouds outside, right, and you're like, wow, what's happening in that cloud, and you literally like see a shape in the cloud, and then you put it down in your drawing, and the thing just kind of grows almost organically. It's got this, and then and that's this sort of weird organic growth, right, of the drawing kind of mirrors the worlds that he is working in. So all of these things are interrelated, but you also, as a viewer, you're doing the same sort of discovery that the artist did, where I'm not sure what all of those shapes are, but I think if I zoomed in on any little piece here, they would just reveal more and more tiny little faces and little weird little guys and stuff. And the pleasure of looking that and making up little stories about what you're seeing, and the pleasure of drawing that sort of stuff and making up little stories about what you're drawing as you're drawing it, is this, it's, I don't know, it's this profound little creative trance you can get into that is deeply, deeply pleasing. And I guess, that's paracosm stuff too, right? If he has made, this is an image from a world that he invented, that he is like speaks to him, or that he is intimately familiar with, and I would be interested to, if, because we've only seen the drawings, right? Like, we don't know how certain he is about like these people, or who this figure is, or if she's like an actual character, if he's just someone that he discovered while doing a drawing this day. But I don't necessarily need that information. I just think it would be interesting to know.
Yep, you want to find out more. But so basically, in putting together these images and getting especially these two from the beginning of end of John Blanch's career, I started thinking about his entire career, and it's a really weird and unique thing for an artist to be in the position of, because I was imagining what would John Blanch be without Games Workshop, and what would Games Workshop and Warhammer be without John Blanch. And I thought, this guy who loves the Middle Ages has ended up basically living the life of a cathedral builder or a mason or an artist who serves like a religious institution, or a guy who does the windows for a cathedral, because he has this one big institution that he's the artistic director for. He worked for it for almost his entire creative life. They paid him to basically build a quasi-religious reality for them. And yeah, he's like a guy who serves the Borgias or something, or a guy, the mason of a. I'm repeating myself, but there's no one else I can think of who's done anything quite like that. He was the artistic director as well. So his vision of this.
Is out there right now, though, who are looking for, just give us a call. You know where to find us all. We're ready. We can make you a beautiful mind cathedral.
Okay. I feel like if any of the guys who actually are super rich gave you a call, you would probably just be like, no, actually, I was like, I can't be seen working for you.
I'll do anything. I'll even write a poem about them. It'll be like,
okay,
that this guy is so, he's so great. Signed, Joe. The end.
So a question I had for both of you is, can you think of any other artist who's had this dominating effect through interaction with a single paracosm or a single company, where basically they've had like it's almost like their world, but
H.R.
they've produced
Geiger?
it for it. Say again?
H.R. Geiger?
Oh yeah, but that's true. He's made his own paracosm. Oh yeah.
He's not
Actually,
really
yeah,
the
it's
closest
that,
thing I can think of anyway.
that's actually pretty correct. Yeah. And Jack Kirby is the other one I thought of, because him with Marvel, he basically created the house style and invented a huge amount of their background reality. But these strange men and the way they fall into what is the neo-paracosm? It's post-religious. What is it? Hyper, spiritual industrial? I don't know. But here to be like to have your images translated into box art and advertising and playing cards, and then for them to go out and infect so many people through the power of industrial replication, to the extent that you start basically a Blanchitsu handcraft movement, which John Blanche doesn't like the phrase Blanchitsu, because I think it annoys him. But there is an entire artistic group of people whose entire thing is being inspired by him and hanging out and doing minis and pictures and stuff, basically in his image.
This is miniature painting specific.
They do miniature painting. It's largely that, but there are also people who produce actual art for the miniature painted worlds, and so it's like bam, bam, bam. You went from Blanche's arts to Blanche's miniatures to Blanchitsu miniatures to people doing art inspired by Blanchitsu miniatures. The paracosm just keeps breeding, or the emotional energy of it just keeps transmitting itself, finding willing hosts here and there to uphold it. I wonder what will become of this. Yeah. He's almost like a British Disney, if you like. He's created a style, a world, a way of saying that will be difficult to escape, even if you want to escape it, because people, even in the future, who have nothing to do with him, will still be responding to artists who are responding to him. The power, I tell you. Power of the strange old man who sits in his room drawing pictures of very strange ladies with pens using pencil.
Yeah, sometimes the fates align and the perfect guy gets the perfect job for him, and then we get all of this. It's incredible.
I watched the original Star Wars recently, and I was thinking, which I think is a total confection of art production, and I was thinking about whoever came up with the reproducible TIE fighter sound, and what just the way that is going to propagate indefinitely for all people forever.
That guy, but we'll never know who that guy's name is.
I'm sure there's another pedant out there who could probably tell you.
I'm sure there's a YouTube drama over correctly naming the sound engineers on the original Star Wars, and guys kicking off on each other in forums somewhere, saying, "No, it was Alf Wynn. No, it's the other guy. No, it's clear in this 1993 documentary where you can see him in the background. He's moving his hand in a particular way that you would only use if you were manipulating a soundboard. Can't you see?"
Yeah. See, if it was really the Middle Ages, we'd only be able to have these arguments about saints and stuff. It would be so much more boring.
I think they made it pretty interesting for themselves, though.
True. Be careful what you wish for.
Okay. That's true. All right. Well, Patrick, thank you so much for joining us and for all of your patience with our rudimentary AV knowledge.
Thanks for inviting me.
It was incredible to have you, and I won't let anyone yell at you in the comments. If they do it, I'll go down there and I'll kick them around a lot.
Oh no! Don't get involved. It only makes things worse.
No, man, I'm so tough.
Yeah.
They won't know what hit them.
Yeah. Joe's actually a master of debate, repartee, logic. Joe's the kind of guy who will take your response, break it into individual paragraphs, and then disprove each one decisively.
Oh, I used to know a guy like that. Long story, but we're not friends anymore.
Well, everyone, I'm going to do the sign off now. Yeah. Thanks for joining us here on Fantasy Art History with Abelard and Joe. Oh, Patrick, do you want to I guess if you want to plug anything, you could do that now. I think that's something people do on podcasts.
Why would I plug anything on my sock? I have.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Oops.
If
okay,
you've seen my spider, give me a call. Drop a comment.
Yeah.
Wow. We're really helping people out here, and that's beautiful. Well, friends, until next time.
Keep on dreaming.